No video last week because I was away at a retreat for people in Germany interested in formation. Now, I'm a dad, and so I am concerned about the formation of my kids. I have teenage kids, a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I'm concerned about things like, are they going to grow up to be healthy, strong, intelligent, capable, loving, kind adults? And I'm aware that I have an important role in that process, a primary role, and I take that seriously, and I do thinking about, well, how can I do that better, and what kind of factors do I need to take into account given where I live in a big city in Europe, Western culture, so that happens. One of the things that I did to that end was around Christmas, I read this book, Hold On to Your Kids, by Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Maté. Sorry, I just struggle to not pronounce it in a German way. Now, the subtitle really says it all: why parents need to matter more than peers. And what they describe is how Western culture has become a place where peer orientation has taken the main role of giving young people identity and giving them a sense of what the future is and what it means to be a human being, instead of the more typical traditional idea that the older generations will shape and form the younger ones, and that the younger ones will naturally want to become like the older ones. And we have this more unique culture in which especially as kids get older and older, their peers become the forces which are most shaping of who they are. Now, they call it peer orientation, but I think it probably is just as well to speak about peer formation, that we live in a peer formation culture. Now, as a dad, I'm concerned about that because, well, I have my doubts about how well my kids' friends can raise them. Hey everybody, welcome to the Sanctus Forum. I am Michael Stewart Robb, better known as Mike, and glad you're here. Glad that you are here to think with me a little bit. Subscribe if you've already seen a couple of these videos. Newsletter over at Sanctus.Institute. Sanctus.Institute is an institute for theology and spiritual formation, and thinking about this formation idea, about how we are shaped by the influences of other people. And that's what a lot of that retreat was about that I was at, how we are formed not just in classrooms or very intentional settings, but we are formed a lot by the environment that we are set in. These authors here, Neufeld and Maté, they ascribe to a theory called attachment theory, and think that that's incredibly important for how we develop as human beings. I don't really have time to explain it, but if you look it up online, you'll be able to get all sorts of information about it. But basically the idea is that human beings are come into the world, and they need to form attachments to other human beings. And it's a bit like the ducklings that follow around Mama Duck, and human beings are looking for people to follow around, and ideally that's going to happen with their parents. Their parents are going to be there, and they are going to have a strong association with them. They're going to get their sense of identity and purpose from them, and that's going to set them up for a life when those parents are not so available anymore. Maybe they're dead. But if that doesn't happen, if the parents are sort of only partially there, maybe they're ill in some way, or they don't do their duty or something, then human beings will become attached to other people, other things, and we have developed a culture, they argue here, in which that formation, that attachment, is not largely coming from parents anymore or from grown-ups, but it is actually coming from the young person's sphere of influence, their peers, not their sphere of influence, but the people that are around them who are their age, peers. That's a very long way to say peers. And they describe all sorts of negative effects that come with that. They talk about the flatlining of culture. Now, you would think older people would have a greater sense of what's good in music and film and books and those kinds of things than would other young people. But if you have a peer-oriented culture, then young people are not going to get a sense of culture from the older people. They'll get it from younger people, and then we'll have a lot of cultural things that are just very low entry level. So you get the flatlining of culture. Another thing is that kids can get stuck in immaturity because they're looking for their sense of what it means to be a human being from people who are not much more mature than themselves, or perhaps are less mature. They get their sense of the potential of human beings only from very lacking kinds of sources which are not very developed, and so they get stuck in that kind of immaturity loop. Another thing that they talk about here, and these are separate chapters, is about how kids can become less teachable because they don't quite know what it means to be curious and to have their minds expanded by people who are further ahead than them. They become closed off and are much harder to deal with in school because they pretty much don't think that older people have anything of much use to say to them. Now, with all that in mind, I think the book is slightly dated. It came out in 2004. There's a lot, really quite a bit, that we can still use in this book because this attachment stuff and peer orientation hasn't gone away. However, there's a lot less in here about what smartphone and device usage has done to this parent and kid relationship and the peer orientation ness of our culture. They do add a couple extra chapters in here that they've updated the book a couple times, but it's not quite enough. The book is already a bit too long, and I know that they probably didn't want to just double the size, which may be necessary because I would say that today the biggest thing that drives a wedge between parents and young people are devices. Smartphones, tablets, these are the biggest thing that can leave kids in a peer-oriented culture and not give them the ability to learn and be formed by their parents and by the older generation. And I think this happens away from home. So initially when phones were developed and people got their phones, I'm doing this because we did a lot of texting with buttons. And there was this sort of sense of keeping your kid on a leash. That was almost the initial reason why you would get your young child a phone at all, is when they leave the house, you can be in contact with them. And of course, that is a kind of attachment, but it also introduced the possibility of a new kind of dependence and attachment to peers, because they weren't just texting with their parents, they were texting with each other. And so you have these kids who, wherever they are in the world, away from home or at home, they are constantly in connection with their peers. And that hasn't changed with phones becoming smart, that's still a kind of baseline reality that we have to deal with. But I think that away from home isn't the primary place where we see this sort of wedge being driven. I think it's primarily at home. And it has to do with the fact that we have this idea that we have to have personal devices for everybody. Everybody needs to get their own smartphone, and possibly their own computer or tablet, something like this, and we're going to use them separately. Now, the reason why this becomes such a wedge between parents and young people is that we have greatly underestimated the effect that media of all kinds can have upon us and can have upon our kids. And this is all sorts of things, beginning with something like advertisements, but also just those peer postings that happen on social media, to celebrity and influencer postings that happen there, to the typical television streaming kinds of things, to music. All of this is having an incredibly formative effect on us, but especially on our kids, to the degree that they are exposed to it. And if they have a personal device, which they carry around with them or take into their rooms or even carry around the house, that is like a window that we are opening in our homes to all these outside influences which are coming in and are telling our kids who they are and what they can be and how they should get there. And you see, here's the thing, what the authors of this book are arguing is that even if we could limit all of those outside influences, no ads, no social media, so no influencers, we limit access to YouTube and all the streaming things, music and all of that, even if we manage to block it all out of our homes, peers alone, contact with peers alone through devices, here's my wife's old phone, here's our iPad, would be enough to give our kids a kind of peer orientation rather than an adult orientation, a parent orientation. And I think it's a reason why anxiety is very much on the rise, and that's because kids are exposed to things through their own devices, which we gave to them, which previously the home was designed to protect them from. I mean, I'm not saying like let's raise sheltered kids, but let's at least think of the home as something like a shelter and not just open the windows in every single direction. I've got some small tips for what we could maybe do to be a stronger influence upon young people and also for ourselves. I don't think that once we grow up and we start to get gray hairs, which people tell me I have, I'm pretty sure I don't have any, that then we don't have any more growing up to do. We are still developing as people, and we will be developing as people for a very, very, very long time. Here are my two tips. One is to have shared devices. There's no reason why everybody in the family needs to have their own personal device of every certain kind. So in our house, for example, we only own one smartphone so far. 4 people at home, only one smartphone, functional smartphone. This is broken. We only have one tablet, and we only have one computer, home desktop kind of computer, which means that we share, which means that we sometimes have to wait, and one person is using the computer and we have to wait until it's our turn to use it. We have to share the phone, we share the tablet, but it also means that we tend to do things together, and that is something that is a bit of a lost art, this idea that these things can be gathering points and places where we can be looking at things together, watching things together, which obviously for our kids helps them process things, but also for us as adults helps us process things. We also use these devices, like I said, the phone, the tablet, we use them in common rooms. So we don't really allow for bedroom use or private use. And this has really helped us quite a bit to keep those connections to each other and not open too many windows for influence and formation to the outside world. The other tip that I have, and this is going to apply in two different ways, is spend time with grown-ups. I mean, one of the ways that we grow up ourselves is that we find other people who are grown up in a way that we aren't. I've called them before spiritual adults or wise adults. I mean, just because we have reached a certain age doesn't mean that we have all wisdom and all knowledge, and there's still a lot more to go. And it's the same for our kids. It's very important to, instead of giving them a device, which then becomes their window to the world, to put ourselves there instead, to create those attachments, to use their word here, to create bonds, which can show our teens what's possible, and they want that. They are looking for older people that they can, or people, let's say, that they can attach to, learn from, and know what it means to be a human being. But the same applies for us too. So think about who is it in your life that you can be connected with and learn what it means to become a strong, healthy, intelligent, capable, loving, kind human being. Who are those people? Can you identify any of them in your near vicinity? Do they live further away? Can you be telephoning with them, writing them letters or emails? Can you read their books? Whatever it is. Well, thank you for being here. I subscribe if you got all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you next week. Bye.